My daughter-in-law left for a trip and ordered, "Keep the house clean." I smiled and waited until she left. Then I put the keys on the table and quietly carried out my plan. When she returned, what she saw froze her. The morning they left for Hawaii, the hallway was a chaotic mess of oversized suitcases and discarded shoes. I stood near the kitchen island, quietly wiping down the granite countertop. Sarah, my daughter-in-law, adjusted her designer sunglasses and pointed a perfectly manicured finger at the floor. "David, grab the blue bag," she commanded, before turning her sharp gaze to me. "We're going to be gone for 10 days. Judith, we won't be needing you to cook, obviously, but make sure you keep the house clean. The floors need mopping, and please don't touch the thermostat. I like the temperature right where it is." She didn't ask. She instructed. It was the same tone she used when speaking to the teenage cashier at the grocery store. David, my son, simply scrolled through his phone, completely ignoring the blatant disrespect. He had mastered the art of being selectively deaf whenever his wife spoke to me. "Have a safe flight," I replied softly. The kids, little Leo and Mia, ran over to give me quick hugs. I squeezed them tight, breathing in the scent of their strawberry shampoo. "Let's go. Kids, the Uber is waiting," Sarah snapped. Marching out the front door, David trailed behind her, barely tossing a wave over his shoulder. The heavy oak door clicked shut. The sudden silence in the house was deafening. I stood there for a long moment, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. I walked over to the entryway table, picked up the spare set of keys Sarah had tossed there, and dropped them into my pocket. For 3 years, I had shrunk myself to fit into the corners of my own home. I had become an unpaid maid, a convenient babysitter, and a silent observer in the house my late husband and I had built. Not anymore. 10 days was more than enough time. I walked slowly through the ground floor, viewing the space not as a grandmother or a mother-in-law, but as the sole owner on the deed. The house had changed entirely since David and Sarah moved in temporarily to save money. The living room, once filled with warm cherry wood and plush navy cushions, was now a sterile sea of slate gray and uncomfortable geometric metal. Sarah had called my furniture depressing and relegated it to the basement. I stopped in front of the massive, ridiculous smart TV David had bought using the credit card I lent him for toddler emergencies. I pulled a small notepad from the kitchen drawer and started making a list. I didn't shed a single tear. Crying was for people who felt helpless, and I was entirely in control. First on the list was the finances. I walked over to my laptop on the kitchen counter and logged into my bank account. There was a joint checking account I had opened to help them with household groceries when David was between jobs. I clicked on the transaction history. The most recent charge was for a luxury resort upgrade in Maui. I took a deep breath, feeling a steady calm wash over me. With 3 clicks, I transferred the remaining balance, the exact amount of my original contribution, directly into my private savings account. Then, I closed the joint account permanently. Next, I opened my wallet and pulled out the physical card linked to that account. I took a pair of heavy kitchen shears from the block. The plastic snapped cleanly in 2, followed by another satisfying crunch as I cut it into quarters. I dropped the pieces into the trash bin. The financial umbilical cord was severed. They had 10 days of vacation bliss left. But when they returned, the Bank of Judith was permanently closed. I looked at the second item on my list. It was time to fix the physical space. The next morning, I called my older sister, Helen. Unlike me, Helen had never possessed a filter, and she had never liked Sarah. When I told her my plan over the phone, she didn't offer sympathy. She offered muscle. By noon, Helen pulled into the driveway, accompanied by her two college-aged grandsons, Mark and Tyler. They were big, strong boys who worked for pizza and gas money. "All right, Judith," Helen announced, walking through the front door and surveying the sterile gray living room with absolute disgust. "Where is this hospital waiting room furniture going?" "The garage," I instructed, pointing toward the side door. "Be careful not to scratch the walls, but get it all out of my sight." For the next 3 hours, the house was filled with the sound of heavy lifting and grunting. The boys carried Sarah's expensive, uncomfortable modern sofa out to the garage, followed by the glass coffee table and the metal accent chairs. Once the room was empty, we headed down to the basement. Underneath protective canvas tarps sat my real furniture. The boys hauled up my beautiful cherry wood bookshelves, the plush navy sofa my late husband had loved, and the woven rugs I had bought on a trip to New Mexico. As they placed the last armchair by the window, the room instantly warmed up. It looked like a home again. It looked like my home. Helen handed me a cup of coffee, looking around with a satisfied nod. "It breathes better now. That gray nonsense was suffocating. It's just the beginning." I took a sip of the dark roast. "The upstairs is next." Helen raised an eyebrow, a rare grin spreading across her face. "You're taking back the master." "I never should have left it," I replied, setting my mug down on the wooden coffee table. For 2 years. I had slept in the cramped sewing room so David and Sarah could have the ensuite. That arrangement ended today. We carried a stack of cardboard boxes up the stairs. I pushed open the door to the master bedroom. The space was massive, catching the beautiful afternoon light, but Sarah's influence was everywhere. Clothes were draped over chairs. Dozens of high-end shoes lined the walls, and expensive cosmetics littered the double vanity. I didn't throw anything. I didn't break anything. I simply packed. Helen and I worked methodically. We folded David's slacks and Sarah's designer dresses with precise care, laying them neatly into the boxes. We wrapped her glass perfume bottles in tissue paper and packed her shoes in pairs. I felt no anger as I worked, only a deep, profound sense of relief. "She has more shoes than a department store," Helen muttered, taping up the 4th box. "Where is all this going?" "The back room," I directed. We moved the boxes down the hall to the small 10 by 10 room I had occupied for the last 24 months. We stacked them neatly against the wall. It was a tight fit, but it wasn't my problem. They were guests, and guests didn't get the master suite. Once their belongings were cleared out, the boys helped move my solid oak bed frame and vintage dresser back into the large room. I stripped their expensive white linen sheets off the mattress and replaced them with my favorite floral quilt. I arranged my books on the nightstand and placed the framed photograph of my late husband back in its rightful spot on the dresser. I stood in the center of the room, breathing in the scent of cedar and lemon polish. I hadn't realized how much my shoulders had been hunched, how shallow my breathing had become over the last few years. Sleeping in my own bed that night felt like waking up from a very long, very tiring dream. I stretched out, listening to the wind against the large bay window. Tomorrow. I had one more crucial phone call to make. Wednesday morning arrived with bright sunshine and a to-do list that was rapidly shrinking. I sat at the kitchen island now, free of Sarah's imported mineral water bottles, and opened my laptop. When David and Sarah moved in, they had convinced me to upgrade the house's services. Sarah needed the fastest fiber optic internet for her online shopping, and David wanted the premium sports cable package. Naturally, The bills were automatically deducted from my checking account. I logged into the utility provider's portal. I downgraded the internet to the basic tier, which was more than enough for my emails and evening reading. I canceled the premium cable entirely. Then, I tackled the grocery delivery subscription Sarah used to order organic, out-of-season produce on my dime. Canceled. My phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text message from David. "Mom, Sarah saw a beautiful pearl necklace at the resort boutique. My card declined for some reason. Can you wire $500 to my account? I'll pay you back on the 1st." I read the message twice. 2 years ago. I would have panicked, worried about my son being embarrassed at a checkout counter, and sent the money immediately. I would have believed the promise of repayment, even though the first of the month never seemed to bring any checks my way. I tapped the screen and typed my reply. "The joint account is closed. You will have to budget with what you have. Enjoy the beach." I hit send and turned the phone completely off. I didn't need to see the frantic typing bubbles or the inevitable follow-up calls. He was a grown man with a job. If he couldn't afford a pearl necklace, his wife would simply have to live without it. I closed the laptop, feeling 10 pounds lighter. The digital ties were cut. The financial drain was plugged. There was only one physical barrier left to address to ensure my peace of mind was absolute. On Thursday afternoon, a white van with bold blue lettering pulled into the driveway. A friendly man in a utility shirt hopped out, carrying a heavy metal toolbox. "Mrs. Hamilton?" he asked, walking up the front steps. "Yes. Thank you for coming on such short notice." I ushered him inside. "No problem at all. You said you needed the front, back, and garage doors done." "Exactly," I confirmed. "I want completely new deadbolts and handles for all three. Not rekeyed. Entirely new hardware." I watched as he systematically dismantled the old brass locks. These were the locks Sarah had complained about, the ones she had casually tossed the keys to on her way to an island vacation, paid for largely by my savings. I handed the locksmith a glass of iced tea as he worked. There was no drama, no legal paperwork, no police involvement. It was simply a homeowner securing her property. Within 2 hours, the job was done. He handed me a ring of heavy, shiny, silver keys. "You're the only one with these copies, ma'am," he assured me, packing up his tools. I paid him in cash, locked the front door behind him, and slipped the new keys into my pocket. I walked over to the kitchen counter where Sarah's old set of keys still sat next to the fruit bowl. I picked them up, walked to the trash can, and dropped them in. They landed with a dull, final thud. The house was secure, the stage was set. I spent the rest of the evening preparing a slow-roasted pot roast with heavy garlic and onions. Sarah absolutely hated the smell of onions in the house, claiming it ruined the ambiance. I let the rich, savory aroma fill every corner of the downstairs. I poured myself a glass of red wine, sat in my favorite Navy armchair, and turned on a classic mystery movie. For the first time in years, the house felt exactly the way it was supposed to. Friday and Saturday passed in a state of tranquil routine, without the constant hum of Sarah's demands or David's passive presence. I found a rhythm I hadn't enjoyed since my husband passed. I tended to the garden, trimming back the overgrown rose bushes Sarah had neglected. I read 3 chapters of a novel without being interrupted to find a missing shoe or settle a minor dispute. Helen came over for dinner on Saturday night, and we ate at the reclaimed cherry wood dining table, laughing loud enough to echo in the hallway. Sunday morning arrived, bringing with it a subtle shift in the air. Their flight was scheduled to land at noon. They would be at the house by 2 o'clock. I didn't pace. I didn't wring my hands. I simply went about my morning. I brewed a pot of strong black coffee, wiped down the already pristine countertops, and sat at the kitchen island with the Sunday paper. At exactly 2:15 p.m., the crunch of gravel signaled the arrival of the airport taxi. I didn't get up to look through the blinds. I simply turned the page of the newspaper and waited. I heard the heavy trunk of the taxi slam shut. I heard the muffled, exhausted voices of the children, and Sarah's sharp tone directing the luggage. Footsteps echoed loudly on the wooden planks of the front porch. Then came the metallic scrape of a key sliding into the deadbolt. Silence. A frustrated jiggle. Another scrape. "David, this lock is stuck." Sarah's muffled voice carried through the solid oak door. "Let me try," David replied. A different key slid into the slot. It didn't turn. "What is wrong with this door?" Sarah snapped, her patience already entirely depleted from the long flight. The doorbell chimed, loud and demanding. I folded my newspaper neatly, took a final sip of my coffee, and stood up. It was time. I walked slowly down the hallway, the hardwood cool beneath my slippers. I unlocked the new deadbolt with a solid click and pulled the door open. David stood on the welcome mat, his sunburned face a mask of confusion. Sarah was right behind him, holding a massive designer tote bag, looking thoroughly annoyed. The kids were sitting on the suitcases, looking exhausted. "Mom, what's wrong with the lock?" David asked, reaching out to push past me. I didn't step aside. "The lock isn't broken, David. I had it changed on Thursday." Sarah pushed her way to the front, her brow furrowed. "Why on earth would you change the locks while we were gone? Give us the new keys. I need a shower." "Come in," I instructed, finally stepping back. Sarah barged past me, dropping her tote bag on the floor. She took 3 steps toward the living room and froze. Her mouth parted slightly, but no sound came out. She stared at the navy sofas, the cherry wood bookshelves, and the woven rugs. The sterile gray fortress she had built was entirely gone. "Where is my furniture?" she demanded, spinning around to face me. "Your items are stored safely in the garage," I answered calmly. David walked in, carrying 2 heavy suitcases. He dropped them when he saw the living room. "Mom, what is going on here?" Without waiting for an answer, Sarah marched past us and stormed up the stairs toward the master bedroom. David and I stood in the hallway in silence. 10 seconds later, a sharp gasp echoed from the second floor. Sarah appeared at the top of the stairs, her face flushed red with absolute fury. "Our room! Our clothes are gone! There is an old wooden bed in my room. It's my room." "Sarah," I corrected her, keeping my voice perfectly level. "Your belongings are boxed up in the back bedroom." Sarah descended the stairs, her hands shaking with anger. "You packed my things. You put us in the storage room. Who do you think you are?" "I am the owner of this house," I replied, meeting her furious gaze without blinking. "And you are guests who have severely overstayed your welcome." "Mom, you can't do this," David stammered, looking frantically between me and his wife. "We live here." "You existed here," I corrected him. I walked over to the entryway table and picked up a thick manila envelope I had prepared. I handed it to David. "Those are the cancellation confirmations for the premium cable, the grocery delivery, and the upgraded internet. You will also notice a printout showing I have closed our joint account." David opened the envelope, his eyes scanning the papers. He looked like a man who had just realized the ground beneath him was missing. You cut off our money. Sarah's voice peaked into a shrill pitch. We just got back from a trip. We need groceries. We have children. You are two capable, working adults, I stated smoothly. If you wish to stay in this house, you will occupy the back room. You will purchase your own food. You will pay 1/3 of the utilities. And you will treat me with respect. If that arrangement doesn't suit you, you are free to load your boxes from the garage into a moving truck. I am not sleeping in a 10-by-10 box, Sarah yelled. David, do something. David looked at me, pleading. Mom, please, let's just go back to normal. We can talk about this. This is the new normal, David, I answered. There is nothing left to discuss. I turned my back on them and walked toward the kitchen to finish my coffee. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I simply set the boundary in stone. The explosion I expected from Sarah didn't happen in the living room. It happened in the driveway, refusing to even look at the back bedroom. She grabbed the suitcases David had just brought inside and dragged them right back out. She ordered David to book a hotel room. From the kitchen window, I watched David frantically check his banking app on his phone, likely realizing the funds weren't there. They ended up calling Sarah's sister, loading the exhausted children into her cramped sedan, and driving away. They didn't take their furniture from the garage that day. The house fell silent again. But this time, the silence wasn't heavy or lonely. It was incredibly peaceful. A month later, a moving truck arrived to collect the gray furniture and the boxes of clothes. I didn't go outside to help. David came in to hand over his old, useless key. He looked tired, humbled by the reality of paying rent and managing his own finances without a safety net. We got a small apartment across town, he mumbled, staring at his shoes. She's still very angry. She'll manage, I replied simply. And so will you. He nodded, finally looking up at me. There was no resentment in his eyes, just a quiet understanding that the free ride was permanently over. Can I bring the kids by on Sunday? I would love that. I smiled gently. Just let me know what time. When he left, I locked the new deadbolt and walked into my sunlit living room. I sat in my comfortable navy armchair, picked up my book, and breathed in the scent of lemon polish and old paper. I hadn't fought a war. I had simply stopped surrendering, and in doing so, I had finally gotten my home back.